Hi, I'm coming on here to talk about the IMMH conference, and I'm doing a little reflection, connecting some of the things that I said in my book, It Might Be Your Pancreas, to what I heard at the conference, and trying to connect some dots for people who may not understand some of the terminology. So the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health conference was held in San Diego. They do an annual conference, and they pull in a beautiful combination of speakers that are experts in the field of brain health and all the related issues that might be associated to immune burdens and other issues that can fall into play when it comes to mental health and degenerative diseases of the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. And you might see these as ALS, you might see them as Parkinson's, you might see some of these diseases associated to diabetes and the neuropathies, or some viral type of condition or bacterial result, of a bacterial infection. Also maybe parasitic, as you would see in Lyme's. So there's so many things, but one of the big topics there was immune burdens and also exposures to mold. So that was my experience, and it literally consumed my body, and I had to take some drastic measures to help to get out of that place, because I was almost 200 pounds and my body was over responding to everything like you might see in POTS or POTS. I also had some issues with PCOS, and some issues around some other neurological, nerve-related damage where I would go numb in some of my extremities, and then also feel the prickliness in my feet, so all these different things. And then having migraines was a part of my picture, so I understood what the aura was and the changes in smell and some of these other things. So I'm just trying to bridge the gap of bringing some of these terms together, because in my book, It Might Be Your Pancreas, and how to recover from, these issues that we don't really understand sometimes when we're in the middle of things, because we're so sick and we can't figure out how to get out of that horrific feeling. And maybe you're in a lot of pain and fibromyalgia and chronic, just chronic issues, constant. So I wanted to go over the insulin hangover that I mentioned on page 188. So that insulin hangover is what you might see is if you were drinking the night before. And in my case, most of the time, it was the foods I ate. I ate a lot of heavy foods that were carb heavy. So pastas, breads. I was addicted to a lot of sugared products, and powdered sugar. You make all the frostings. I was eating frosting on everything. It was so ridiculous, but you don't realize what you're doing to your body. And I was addicted to cookies and cakes and pies and Aunt Martha's pies. I had an affair with her. But anyway, so some of the things I want to bring together is that feeling of having a hangover in the morning and having trouble waking up in a fog and not feeling like you're rested. And maybe you did sleep or maybe you didn't sleep. And so insomnia comes into play with some of these issues. And believe it or not, if you chronically avoid sleep, you are just setting yourself up for immune burnout. Adrenal burnout, immune burnout, mom burnout, grandma burnout. So you're putting yourself into these roles that maybe you're offering too much of your time and your energy. Let's get back to the insulin hangover. So something that was mentioned about changing your diet and introducing the keto program. And so I didn't go directly to keto. I did a modified keto, sort of paleo. But when I removed all the sugars, that's when my pancreatitis got worse, or the pain worsened. So I also had chronic gastritis. And so when you think about the lining of the stomach, I had H. pylori that was infected in my stomach that affected my gallbladder, and my gallbladder was sluggish. I had slow emptying from the stomach into the gallbladder. Then my liver was unhealthy because it was trying to detoxify. Your kidneys are unhealthy. You're trying to detoxify some of these things. And I was on several different types of antidepressants, anti-anxieties, pain meds, you name it. I was on everything. I had all kinds of bowel stimulants and bowel equalizers and Miralax. And so, when you start compounding all these things and not looking at the root cause, then it causes more damage. And then you're adding things to it that are over-the-counter medications, and you're right there next to the food that's causing the problem, but you don't know it. Okay, so one of the other things that I learned about was how infections can take over in the body, and then how our body gets rid of the cellular, the damage, all the waste products throughout the body, and this takes time. So you might have some days. So that keto flu is actually breakdown and removal of these byproducts and of any waste products. So along with having like that maybe insulin reaction where you feel like you have a hangover, you might feel that breakdown also of yeast and byproducts from yeast breaking down, because when you go on keto, you're no longer feeding that SIBO or SIBO, which could be yeast, and some other bacterial overgrowths in the gut, which is the small bowel. Sometimes it brews in there, just like you would think of dough and the yeast that you put in dough and how it raises. So you think about that. The other thing is there might be an ammonia build up in your body. There's other byproducts that are created from this process of breaking things down. So maybe the slow detoxification. Also, there's that thyroid storm term that affects thyroiditis, and that's when your thyroid is responding because it helps to mediate everything. It's a modulator in the body, in the glands, from the glands from your head to the glands, you're above your kidneys, which are the adrenals, the pancreas, the thymus, and your gonads and your ovaries. So you want to think about the sex hormones, what's going on in your head. So you might be having migraines because not only are the glands in your head, the pituitary, the hypothalamus, the thalamus, all these glands are interacting with hormonal, interactions, and neurotransmitters are also affected. So you want to think about these immune overreactions and how that affects the thyroid gland. And then also something called a cytokine release syndrome. So I've been seeing this more often, also known as a cytokine storm, which is that all of a sudden all this dust comes up and it's all through your body, and your body's trying to eliminate and get rid of these waste products, and it doesn't have a way to do it because it's all in there, and it's just like making you foggy brained and doing all kinds of crazy things to you. So along with hormone dysregulation, you might be dealing with your thyroid overreacting. You might be dealing with viruses, co-infections that are occurring. when you are worn down mentally, emotionally, and you're not sleeping, these things can happen. And it's almost like a mental breakdown. You know, your brain just said, I've had it with you. And your body says, I can't tolerate you anymore. You pass out or whatever your body's doing, or maybe you're developing kidney stones to get rid of some of that stuff. And then surfacing becomes the depression and anxiety. And so many people are on antidepressants and anti-anxieties, and they don't really understand what's going on in their body. So, you know, all these factors are coming together. And when you think about inflammation in the body, you want to be on foods that will help support the immune system, because inflammation there's a healthy amount of inflammation to show. This is happening in the body because your body's trying to get rid of something, okay? So it's attacking. And you talk about T cell regulation, all these things. You want to boost your T cells. You know, that's all involved in cancer. So if you let these chronic conditions go on too long without addressing your lifestyle choices, then it can lead down the path to cancer. And it's not just cancer in one department, not one system. That the whole body, you have to look at the whole makeup. And we're looking at how you feel overall, what your environment is, what your relationships are, and how to understand where to place your time and energy so that you're not constantly pulled back into unhealthy relationships that lead you right back into the same situation. So depression and anxiety, you know, some even like if you're exposed to black mold, you have to figure out a reasonable way. Sometimes it's just cleaning up your house, cleaning up your refrigerator, cleaning up your bathroom really good, knowing where the vents are, changing everything in the house. And you know, when you do a seasonal clean, you got to address everything, because sometimes if it's in your walls and it's a chronic problem, then you got to really think, how beneficial is it for you to be where you are? This is not easy. And then understanding what dry eye has to do with tinnitus. What are these things? What's going on in our body? Is it the foods we're taking in? Is it the exposure to dry air and dust particles? If you don't dust and clean things and try to keep it in a place where you are breathing in the cleanest possible air for the situation, and then getting outside to be in some space where you can breathe some fresh air. Okay, so nature helps us along, because that CO2 and O2 production outside, you want to get out there, and it's all respiratory. The cells go through a respiratory cycle. We go through a respiratory cycle with our breathing. Everything's going through respirations. So again, some of the things that come into play when you're burdened, it can turn problems, the stress mode on in your nervous system. There's I always say your sympathetic and parasympathetics. Okay, when you look at it just without para and symp, you're pathetic. Okay, so is it sympathetic or parasympathetic? And most of the time, the stress response is stuck in the sympathetic mode. And then you get autonomic dysregulation from having maybe a histamine response to things, over responding. You're really heightened to the level that your body is looking at everything as, your alarm system is on high stress mode. And you're reacting in a way that is overreactive, unfortunately, because you have to come into a space that is a cleaner space, using your breathing techniques to calm things down in your nervous system, do some meditation. So I just wanted to bring those words together. Another word is the Herxheimer's reaction. The Herxheimer's reaction is the same as the cytokine release syndrome and the thyroid storm type thing, and your body's detoxing mechanisms. And if they're not working properly and you're not eliminating your stool in a way that's meant to eliminate these toxins, then it's building up inside, and then it's causing some major issues up here. So my name is Diane Greco-Allen. You may or may not know my situation related to pancreatitis, but inflammatory foods in the 5 points of awareness and the 5 W's that I use, the stop mechanism, remembering to put your boundaries out there and don't be afraid to say, I cannot engage today. I have to set my limits on keeping mindfulness in my life and supporting my own body. So I hope you have a good day and that you learned something from this little conversation about what might be going on in your body. Diane Greco-Allen. Have a great day.